Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'd like to remind the audience that there are over 8 billion people on Earth. What if I told you that 0.0000025% of the population controls the future of technology, society, and human evolution itself? Is big tech taking over your world? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the question that defines the AI industry. Most of us think that religious leaders or politicians are the most powerful actors on our planet, and this is completely false. In a world where we're influenced more by technology that we use than people in our lives, it is completely irrational to assume that we have free will or that we are in control. Let's face it, those who control mainstream technology effectively control us as a society. Now, let's quickly illustrate this with a show of hands. Raise your hand if you recognize the logo in the bottom left corner of the screen. All right, now how about the man in the top left? Considerably less people raise their hand. So, for those of you who didn't raise your hand, that man is Antonio Guterres. He's the Secretary General of the United Nations, and theoretically at least, the most powerful man in the world. He has all the power on paper that he could ever want, but any action or policy he wants to take are limited by bureaucracy and international law. Contrarily, when you look at corporations like Google, Apple, or Meta, they can essentially do whatever they want, so long as they comply with significantly looser regulations. So, as you can see, big tech is higher on the tier list here. Okay, big tech is everywhere, but why am I talking about AI? AI is currently in a very interesting position. It is simultaneously the next big thing and the current big thing, and we're at the start of a sigmoid curve in terms of its rate of development. Just a few years ago, when I spoke about AI in other talks, the only real-world examples I could think of were Siri and Google Images. Those same few years have seen the development of a plethora of new AI technologies that are all simply beyond count. The food we eat, the products we buy, and the people we befriend are all determined and influenced by AI algorithms in some way. Thus, I think it is foolish to assume that we have control or that we have free will in a world where almost every decision involves artificial intelligence. Now, remember the sigmoid curve I mentioned earlier. We are at the start of the sigmoid curve. AI is gradually gaining traction and is moving towards the steeper side of the function. But it is still somewhat naive in its mainstream abilities and presence. AI is incredibly powerful, and it has the potential to change the world for the better, and it already has. It automates repetitive tasks, helps us solve problems, and allows us to address some of the most pertinent problems in the 21st century. We can see AI's prevalence in the corporate world as well. 35% of all organizations use AI in some way. And at the top of this list, of course, are big tech companies like Google, IBM, NVIDIA, and Microsoft. What does this illustrate? That big tech's role in everything and presence everywhere is controlled by people who work out of specific contexts, characterized by monetary incentives and relatively low regulation. Now, we have a question that we need to answer here. So big tech is taking over your world, yes, but should we be afraid of this? Should we be afraid of the extent to which big tech is able to control AI? And there are equal arguments for both sides. No, we should not be afraid of big tech because it's capable of pouring large amounts of funding and efficient research into a field of technology that is so incredibly important. In addition, the fact that it has a much larger public reach through its popularity and significance means that it's able to play a really important role in impacting our society and allowing us to develop as a species. At the same time, these very points can bring some seriously prevalent concerns. First of all, big tech's control tends to harm startups. It also reduces public understanding of AI. And lastly, they follow a general pattern of a lack of transparency. So within the big tech industry, larger corporations tend to do one of two things. They either thwart or buy startups. And the simplest example we can think of is ChatGPT, which I'm sure all of you use on a somewhat daily basis, although we don't want to tell our teachers that, but come on, it's true. ChatGPT was essentially bought by Microsoft soon after its potential was fully realized. And we can see this pattern repeating itself over and over again. We can look at the story of Nuance, a small corporation that started developing speech processing softwares almost decades before Apple and Amazon. It was growing at a really strong level with an average growth of 27% in sales annually. But as soon as big tech jumped on the speech processing bandwagon, their growth stalled. And the reason is very simple. Big tech brings bigger money. Bigger money can fund bigger teams and bigger projects. And for example, because they're able to fund these larger teams, R&D teams in big tech companies were 10 times those of Nuance at its all-time peak. And to further complicate matters, a lot of members in these big tech R&D teams were actually top engineers and scientists from Nuance, which once again only adds fuel to the fire of big tech's power. Now, the second concern here, which is I'm sure that everyone can relate with, is that we don't really understand AI. Even myself, as someone who's talking about AI, there's still many questions that remain unanswered and will remain unanswered for a long time. But when I speak to regular people, ordinary people, they mix up concepts like metaverse and blockchain, AI and VR, which are all entirely separate ideas altogether. But we mix them up because technology has grown to become so intrinsic that it is often difficult to understand, especially AI. And once again, big tech has a role to play in this. During the internet boom of the 1990s, the fact that people were able to interact with the internet environment and play a role in its development largely prevented any single corporation from taking over the entirety of tech advancement. But unfortunately, we don't see this pattern repeating itself in AI. These corporations, and specifically AI, require a lot of incredibly specialized understanding. You need to be experienced with years of prior background in computer science and programming in order to play a minutely significant role. And of course, people who have those experience will go to big tech companies because they offer higher salaries, they offer stock options, and greater opportunities for employees to innovate. But while these are all incredibly vital concerns, I think the biggest worry here is the lack of transparency. Even in the quote-unquote transparency reports that these companies release, half the time you can see that they don't even adhere to their own policies and guidelines, let alone basic codes of moral conduct or international standards. An example of this can be seen with the Santa Clara Principles, which were formally adopted and endorsed by dozens of big tech companies since 2018, including Apple and Amazon. Ironically enough, dozens of big tech companies since 2018, including Apple and Amazon, have violated almost all of these principles, even though they formally, or at least claim to have, formally adopted these principles in their companies. And this shows the real terrifying problem here. No one has the guts to challenge big tech. We are so reliant on big tech that in the most drastic scenario, let's take shutting down Google, for example. 4.3 billion people lose access to their preferred platform for using the internet. Just think about that. No Google. The economy would shut down, lives would be lost, the entire planet would be sent into turmoil that we might not ever recover from until it comes back. To further complicate matters, the CEOs and owners of such companies almost always have ties to politicians. Notable examples include Tim Cook and Donald Trump, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump. Okay, wait, maybe it's a Trump problem, but all jokes aside, there have been numerous serious cases raised with regards to concerns over big tech's transparency. And the most notable of such cases surfaced in June last year, when Google engineer Blake Lemoine raised concerns about the AI chatbot developed at Google called Lambda, showing signs of sentience. He's a member of the Google AI responsible team, which means he's responsible to ensure that the chatbot wasn't being discriminatory in any way or using any hate speech. Now, while he didn't find the latter, he did instead find messages like these, which I'm sure all of you can agree alarmingly indicates some form of sentience. He presented this evidence along with further alarming messages to higher-ups at Google, but his concerns were dismissed. And mysteriously enough, immediately after that meeting, he was put on administrative leave. He continued voicing his concerns about the new sentient chatbot, but he was later fired. If Lambda is indeed sentient, a billion new questions in AI surface. How do we control something sentient? What rights does a sentient AI being have? What distinguishes AI from humanity? And above all, if big tech cannot be trusted with something as immensely important as the existence of self-aware AI, how can we trust that they will be honest with matters that they deem more minor, like our privacy or our freedom of speech? So a while after I found out about this fairly horrifying story, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I ran a Turing test on ChatGPT. So for those of you who don't know what a Turing test is, it's a simple program that you run on computers where you ask them if they think they're human or not. Simplest terms. So as you can see, I did that and I was returned with these very lovely error messages. Big tech lacks transparency to the point where they're worried about a normal 16-year-old like me writing one line of code. Well, not even code, it's just text. They're worried about that. So this can be tied back to the statistic I mentioned at the start of my speech. That small percentage that controls us all, that is the Google's ethics department. Only 200 people determine how all 8 billion of us interact with the internet from a human perspective and from an ethical or moral standpoint. And bear in mind, those 200 people are all above the age of 30, they come from privileged backgrounds, and they all work out of a lavishly furnished, clean, modern office somewhere in Silicon Valley. Technological control and involvement is being ripped away from the hands of people like us and into small teams that make world-changing decisions behind closed doors. Now, while we may never know what actually happens in these meetings or what things are hidden, there are a number of measures that we can take in order to harness the opportunities that come forth with big tech's involvement. Now, as with almost any problem, education is one of the best solutions. It is completely ironic to me that in most schools, AI is everywhere except for in actual teaching and learning. To solve this, governments can require students to undergo a certain number of hours of computer science, programming, machine learning, data science, any form of education that allows them to fundamentally develop their understanding of AI, which will not only equip them with the skills they need for the future, but also the skills they need for today because of how prevalent AI already is. Within the context of the UAE, this can look like the Ministry of Education integrating AI learning into our required moral studies hours. And the only reason that I'm able to come up here and give a talk like this is because I was blessed with the opportunity of learning about AI. I spent 2 weeks at the National University of Singapore, and over the span of 2 weeks, I went from someone who, didn't really care much about the tech world to someone whose greatest passion is AI. So that's why I'm urging every single person in the audience to take some time, learn about AI, understand what it is, how you can use it, and formulate your own ideas and opinions regarding the topic. Now, the second solution here, it depends on your economic orientation as to whether you think it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we live in a really practical world, and money is incredibly important. Now, because of that, the solution can be split into 2 parts. The first applies to, well, to put it simply, the rich people. Business owners, CEOs, venture capitalists, those who are capable of making large investments in the technological sector. 1 in 3 organizations surveyed in this investigation have no plans at all for AI. They're outside the AI sigmoid curve, and they're vulnerable to plateauing entirely in growth and being overshadowed by big tech companies, or even smaller corporations, because they don't have the AI toolkit, the toolkit that will open their doors to taking advantage of Industry 4.0. The people in the audience can also act towards a solution. I mean, I know not all of us are venture capitalists, maybe some of you are, but take some time to research and invest and understand what are some local startups, small-scale businesses that operate around you that use AI. Instead of solely focusing on big tech, it is our responsibility to work together so we can collectively ensure that we create a sustainable AI and technological industry that allows big tech to thrive alongside and not on top of startups. Last but most certainly not least would be you. Every single person in the audience today is a vital asset in the AI industry. So whether you're going to work for a big tech company or going to start your own startups, you will use AI in some way and you will play a role in its development. And you can take measures as an individual to make sure that you can do this in a positive manner. Now, especially the young people here, we're inevitably going to need a generation of strong AI thinkers who will be capable of replacing our current workers in the tech industry. And while it is incredibly important to make sure that adults working in tech have the necessary skills and technical capacities to understand and work with AI, it is equally important, if not more so, that the younger generation is also capable of interacting with this powerful new technology. Youth capacity building and youth talent is irreplaceable. And that's why I'm once again urging all of you, take measures to learn about AI. Big tech is taking over your world. Yes, we cannot deny that, but we have chances to harness the positives. So take that chance, take advantage of this emerging opportunity, and avoid the negatives that may arise. Because big tech is everywhere, AI is everywhere, and your role is important everywhere. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.